don't text her feels like silence, but to her, it sounds like thunder. There's a strange kind of power in withdrawal. Not the kind born from ego or manipulation, but from the realization that you no longer need to perform for attention. In human behavior, absence is not neutral, it's informational. Silence communicates what words cannot, that the dynamic has changed, that the script she's used to no longer exists. In psychology, this is called a pattern interrupt. You've broken the cycle that trained both of you. You to chase affection and her to expect it on demand. Most relationships, especially unstable ones, are built on invisible choreography. One gives energy, the other absorbs it, and for a long time that rhythm feels like connection, until it starts to feel like control. When you remove your part of the pattern, the system collapses. Not because you won something, but because you stopped feeding it. He used to text her first, every morning without fail. Even after an argument, even when she left him on read, he'd reach out. His messages were breadcrumbs of reassurance. But one morning he didn't. He sat with the impulse, the itch to explain, to fix, to reopen the door, and he didn't move. That day, she checked her phone 12 times. The next, 20. By day 3, she posted something ambiguous, something she knew he'd see. But he didn't reply. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. He realized how much of his worth had been built on being seen by her, and when he stopped performing, he began to exist again. The human mind interprets non-response as meaning. When we expect feedback and receive none, our brain searches for closure. It fills the silence with stories. That's why your withdrawal echoes louder than any argument could, because it forces the other person to confront what they've been avoiding, that the power dynamic was sustained only by your participation. Silence, when grounded in self-respect, is not a punishment. It's truth without explanation. The moment you stop chasing her is the moment she meets the real you, the one she can't control. But silence doesn't just create space, it creates withdrawal, and that's where the real reaction begins. She doesn't miss you at first. She misses the mirror you held up to her, the reflection where she saw her power, her charm, her control, and now that reflection is gone. When you stop chasing her, you don't just take away attention, you take away the psychological drug she's been feeding on, validation. And like any addict cut off from supply, the first reaction isn't reflection, it's panic. Her texts slow down, then speed up. She posts, she withdraws, she reappears with strategic silence. Every move, every word becomes a test, not to win you back, but to see if the leash still works. In behavioral psychology, there's a term called intermittent reinforcement, the strongest form of conditioning known to man. It's the same mechanism that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines. The brain gets addicted not to winning, but to the possibility of winning. A dopamine spike every time there's hope, a crash every time there's silence. When you chased her, you trained her nervous system to expect that rush. Your attention became a predictable unpredictability, a loop of reward and withdrawal. Now, when you stop, her brain doesn't just miss you emotionally, it panics chemically. That's why your silence feels louder than any argument. You've broken the pattern that kept her in control. She was used to him breaking first, 3 days. That's usually all it took. By the 4th, she opened his chat, typed something vague. "Hey, just wanted to check in." Then deleted it. By the 6th, she posted a quote about knowing your worth. By the 7th, she called one of his friends. Every move was a quiet attempt to pull him back into orbit, but the gravity had shifted. He was no longer responding to the pull, and that terrified her. Because the silence was no longer about punishment, it was about freedom. When attention disappears, the ego experiences what psychologists call ego death by absence. Without the familiar validation loop, identity feels unstable. That's why people project, provoke, or guilt trip. They're not trying to connect, they're trying to restore their reflection. In toxic dynamics, love isn't about affection, it's about regulation. And when you step away, you're not removing love. You're removing the system that pretended to be love. When you remove your energy, you reveal who was there for you and who was there for your attention. But silence doesn't last forever. Sooner or later, she'll test the boundary to see if your peace is real or just another performance. In every relationship, there exists a silent mirror, the way one person reflects the other's desires, fears, and insecurities. This is where true psychological influence begins. When a woman mirrors a man's emotional state, she creates a sense of deep connection. He feels seen, and in that illusion of recognition, he lets his guard down. But what's really happening is far more subtle. She's shaping his emotional landscape by controlling what he sees of himself through her reflection. This isn't manipulation in the traditional sense. It's resonance, the art of emotional mirroring. Those who master it don't need to demand. They guide through energy, tone, and presence. In the end, the mirror game isn't about control over another person. It's about understanding how perception itself can become a form of power. The one who defines the reflection defines the reality. Most people believe they're choosing freely who they love, what they desire, what they chase. But the truth is more haunting. Our choices are often invisible responses to conditioning, reward, and fear. A woman who understands this doesn't try to control a man directly. She shapes the environment around his decisions, what he feels is safe, what he believes he wants, what he fears losing. It's not mind control. It's emotional architecture. She builds the walls, paints the illusions, and lets him walk willingly into the room he thinks he chose himself. And that's the sweetest kind of power, the one that feels like freedom while softly holding the strings. Desire isn't random. It's a chemical loop, a perfect trap designed by evolution itself. When you stop chasing her, something strange happens in the male brain. The reward pathway, the same one triggered by gambling or winning, lights up. Every moment of silence, every unanswered message, every subtle withdrawal becomes a slot machine pull. You don't know when the next hit of validation will come, and that uncertainty, that intermittent reinforcement, is what makes you crave her even more. This is how addiction is built, not through abundance, but through scarcity. When the source of reward suddenly disappears, the brain panics. It amplifies desire to restore the pattern. You don't miss her, you miss the dopamine. She, on the other hand, often understands this unconsciously. Her stillness becomes strategy, her absence becomes attraction. And while you're analyzing what went wrong, she's holding the lever that decides whether the next dopamine hit ever arrives. The strongest addictions are built in silence, not in pleasure. The trap isn't in her touch, it's in the space she leaves behind, and that space starts whispering louder than her voice ever did. But here's the paradox. Once you recognize the pattern, you can break it. The question is, will you? Because the next phase isn't about her anymore. It's about the mirror she leaves you facing, and that's where the real punishment begins. When she stops responding, the silence doesn't just echo, it reflects. At first you think it's about her coldness, her distance, her change. But as the days pass, you start to realize it's not her voice you miss. It's your own validation that went quiet. Her silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror you see the truth most people spend a lifetime running from. You weren't chasing love, you were chasing proof. Proof that you were enough, desired, chosen. Every message you sent, every call unanswered, every sleepless night scrolling through memories, it wasn't about connection, it was about identity. You built your sense of worth on how she saw you, and when she stopped seeing you, that part of you started to fade. But here's the paradox. Silence can be destruction, or it can be rebirth. Because when the mirror shatters, you get to rebuild your reflection, this time from your own truth. This is where emotional self-sufficiency begins. When the external world withdraws, the internal one wakes up. You start noticing how much of your value was outsourced, how much of your peace depended on someone else's attention, and how fragile that made you. The moment her silence hurts, it's not about her anymore, it's about what you haven't healed. That's why silence is such an effective teacher. It doesn't speak, it shows. It shows who you are when no one is clapping, when no one is admiring, when no one is answering. Most men run from that mirror, but those who face it evolve. Because on the other side of that mirror, beyond the ache, beyond the emptiness, is something she never gave you and never could: self-authority. And once you find that, you stop chasing anyone. Something changes the moment you stop chasing. It's subtle at first, like a storm finally running out of rain. You're no longer looking for her attention, her affection, her approval. You're simply still, and in that stillness, power returns. For the first time, you realize how exhausting it was to constantly prove, persuade, and perform. You mistook pursuit for passion and attachment for love. But now you see the truth. Real connection doesn't demand that you beg for it. It meets you where you stand. When you stop chasing, something fascinating happens. Your energy recalibrates. The desperate impulse fades. Your words slow down. Your eyes soften. You no longer radiate need, you radiate choice. And that energy shift, it's magnetic, because attraction doesn't live in pursuit, it lives in presence. It's not the man who runs after her who captivates her. It's the one who knows exactly where he's going, with or without her. That's the pivot, the psychological alchemy that turns need into discernment. And when you reach it, your entire emotional economy transforms. You no longer measure worth by who stays. You measure alignment by who matches your pace. Because a man who chooses doesn't chase ghosts, he builds kingdoms of calm. It always happens quietly. You stop chasing and suddenly she notices, not because you said something, not because you posted something, but because energy, the one thing you can't fake, has shifted. Before, your attention wrapped around her like gravity. Now that pull is gone, and in its absence, she feels a strange void. The same void you once felt when she pulled away. At first, she'll test it. A small message, a story reaction, a subtle "hey," not out of love, but out of curiosity. She wants to know, where did my reflection go? See, when you were chasing, she saw herself through your desire. You became the mirror that made her feel chosen. Now, that mirror is gone, and for the first time, she's left alone with her own silence. That's the real punishment. Not revenge, not cruelty, just absence. Your absence teaches louder than your words ever could. She'll replay your stillness like a mystery. She'll wonder if you found someone new, or worse, if you found yourself. Because nothing unsettles someone more than realizing they've lost emotional control over the narrative. And yet, the story isn't about her anymore. It's about you, your growth, your evolution, your decision to break the loop of validation and reclaim your center. You've moved from reaction to intention, from chasing comfort to choosing peace, from needing attention to embodying self-respect. And now, if she returns, you'll see it differently. You won't rush, you won't perform. You'll listen, not just to her words, but to your own body, your own intuition. Because the version of you who chased her, he doesn't live here anymore. You've stepped into the abyss, faced your own reflection and come back whole. And the irony, now that you don't need her to stay, that's when she'll want to. Because power, real power, was never in chasing, it was in letting go. When you stop chasing, you stop losing yourself. To expand on this journey, consider how the initial silence you impose isn't just a tactic. It's a doorway to deeper self-awareness. Think about the nights you spent replaying conversations, wondering what you said wrong, or how you could have been more charming. That mental loop was a prison, one you built brick by brick with every desperate text. But when you choose silence, you're dismantling those walls. You're reclaiming the hours, the energy, the focus that was scattered outward. Imagine waking up one morning and feeling the weight lift. Not because she's responded, but because you've stopped waiting for her to define your day. This shift isn't instantaneous. It's a process, layered with moments of doubt. You'll feel the pull, the familiar urge to reach out and fix things. Resist it. In that resistance, you're forging resilience. Psychologically, this mirrors cognitive behavioral therapy techniques where you interrupt automatic thoughts and replace them with intentional ones. You're no longer reacting to her whims, you're authoring your narrative. And as you do, you'll notice subtle changes in your interactions with others, friends, colleagues, even strangers. Your presence becomes grounded, less performative, more authentic. Delve deeper into the chemistry of it all. Dopamine isn't just a feel-good chemical, it's a motivator, pushing you toward rewards. When her responses were sporadic, they created peaks and valleys in your brain's reward system, making each hit more intoxicating. By withdrawing, you're flattening that curve, allowing your system to reset. Over time, you'll find joy in solitude, in reading a book without checking your phone, in pursuing a hobby without seeking her approval. This is where true freedom lies, in the realization that your happiness isn't contingent on anyone else's validation. Reflect on past relationships where this pattern repeated. Maybe it wasn't just her, maybe it was a cycle you've carried from one connection to the next. Silence gives you the space to unpack that baggage. Ask yourself, what fears drive my need to chase? Is it abandonment from childhood, a fear of being unseen? Facing these questions head-on transforms pain into power. You're not just healing from her, you're healing from versions of yourself that no longer serve you. As she senses this change, her reactions might escalate, from casual check-ins to more overt attempts at reconnection. She might share memories, express regret, or even accuse you of changing. Remember, these are echoes of her own discomfort with the new dynamic. Stay centered. Respond if you choose, but from a place of strength, not obligation. This is your opportunity to set boundaries that honor your growth. If the connection reignites, it will be on equal terms, built on mutual respect rather than one-sided pursuit. But what if she doesn't return? That's the ultimate test and the greatest gift. You'll discover that life expands in her absence. New opportunities emerge, deeper friendships, personal achievements, perhaps even new romantic interests who match your evolved energy. You'll look back and see that stopping the chase wasn't about winning her back. It was about winning yourself back. In this evolved state, attraction becomes effortless. Women are drawn to men who embody self-assurance, who don't need to fill silences with noise. Your conversations deepen, your relationships strengthen, because you're operating from abundance, not scarcity. This is the long-term payoff, a life where love enhances you rather than completes you. To sustain this, cultivate practices that reinforce your center. Meditation sharpens your awareness of impulses. Journaling helps process emotions without external input. Exercise channels energy inward. Surround yourself with people who uplift without demanding. Over time, these habits solidify your foundation, making relapses into old patterns less likely. Ultimately, this journey from chasing to choosing reshapes not just your romantic life, but your entire existence. You become the architect of your reality, no longer swayed by fleeting validations. Silence, once a void, becomes a canvas, a space for creation, reflection, and unapologetic self-expression. And in that space, you find a peace that no one can take away, because it's rooted in you.